This is our first ever literary hour event with Ashley Poston. She is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of The Dead Romantics, The 7-Year Slip, and a novel love story that we're going to be talking about today. And she has also written over a half a dozen young adult novels. So welcome, Ashley. We are so excited to have you join us. Tell us where you're joining us from.
Thank you. I am joining y'all from the sunny state of South Carolina.
And is it
So
sunny today?
it is very sunny today. The pollen count is very high. That is my cat Beanie. Uh, if you see her in the background.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a beautiful day. The windows are open, and I am probably going to be murdered by pollen. So we're good.
Well, congrats on your latest novel, A Novel Love Story. Tell us all about it.
A novel love story is about an English professor named Elsie who, on a trip to her yearly book club retreat, she finds herself stuck in a strange small town in the Hudson Valley, New York, that ends up being the fictional town from her favorite romance series. And she is stuck there because her car breaks down. And so she has to navigate what it's like being like a secondary character in this series that she loves that never finished. And yeah, it's it's my love letter to romance tropes and to like the romance series that kind of like raised me. I was a really big fan of the oh gosh, it was like the Wedding Quartet from Nora Roberts. I loved those growing up. And it's my ode to like Gilmore Girls and like small towns and just like soft, lovely love stories that happen in these sort of like small magical moments. So yeah. And it's also about burnout and about like what happens when you love a book so fiercely, but um like the legacy of that book changes. So.
Now, the storyline does differ from your previous novels, The 7-Year Slip, The Dead Romantics, Geekerella. So what gave you the idea for a novel love story?
Ooh, well, I think all of my books like deal with like me talking about something that I really cherish and love, and so novel love story is about romance tropes. Um, but I really wanted to write a portal fantasy, and I wanted to see what a portal fantasy looked like with like contemporary romance rules. So that's kind of what I did. I grew up in fanfic, so I am very familiar with a fan falls into their favorite story. What's going to happen? So I wanted to like play with that part of like fandom that I grew up with, and like see how I could write it now versus when I was a teenager and writing it. So.
Now, is it based on a popular like love story trope that you had read and you wanted to bring that to life, like a story in itself? Was it based on like a Cinderella or a fairy tale?
No, my adult books really aren't based off of different fairy tales or different stories. Like my adult romances, they all have this magical bent to it. They're kind of like I call it like fabulous a little bit because they have this sort of like magical undercurrent, but the story is very solidly contemporary. In The Dead Romantics, it was a ghost story, but it was a ghost story through the eyes of a ghostwriter who feels like thankless in her work, and like her work has been stolen and her story has been changed. And it's about her like getting over the death of her father. And so, what better way to inspect grief than through a ghost story where literally like something cannot leave, like someone cannot leave, right? Um, and in The 7-Year Slip, it's a story about a woman who has everything in her life that she thought she wanted like 7 to 10 years ago, and then it turns out she's still not happy. And so, what better way to show that than having a time travel story that bounces like 7 years into the past and present, right? And so she has to like reckon with like the person that she thought she would become and the person that she is. And and so what better way to explore that than through a time travel. And then for a novel love story, the like the core is about Elsie. She finds herself, she feels like she's a secondary character in her own life, and so what better way to explore that than being an actual secondary character in a story.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I foil my contemporary romances.
Mhm. Now, who was the most fun character to craft in a novel love story?
uh is it too cheap to say the cat butterscotch?
No, we love cats.
I was like, every good bookstore has a cat, and so is this, and so will this one. But my non-silly answer is um probably Anders. Anders was really difficult to write because I needed him to be like a book boyfriend, but also be a real human being with like real history and real baggage, and that's something that you find throughout the story.
Yeah. How many drafts did you write of a novel love story?
Ooh, one, two, three, five drafts. I want to say five drafts. They're all they're very, very, very different from each other. And like the last draft was drafted very, very quickly, because I knew what I wanted and I knew how I wanted to write it, and so I just kind of went for it.
Yeah. Now, without giving away too many spoilers, what was the trickiest scene to craft? Was it like a beginning scene, middle scene?
Oh. Okay, weirdly enough, the hardest scene to write, and this is not going to be a spoiler because it's a romance, there are these scenes. Um, was the sex under the waterfall actually. I was just like, okay, would they die? Like how does the waterfall work in this? Like if it's from like how far up does the water have to be for it to hurt? And so that was the hardest part. I had to track down someone who knew that answer.
The conversation.
Yeah. So I was just like, that's the hardest part. It's just
Yeah.
like sometimes the semantics of things is like, okay, well, is this like realistic, and is this something that can actually happen? And if it isn't realistic, then is it part of like the like conceit of the novel? Is it something that I can get away with, or is it something that I can't? And so
Mhm.
because the waterfall really has nothing to do with this fictional town being fictional and romance tropes, I had to like make it real, or else the readers wouldn't trust me. So like
Yeah.
half of the work is like keeping that trust with like your readership as you're going through these kind of like fantastical moments, and keeping like the center of the story grounded. So
Yeah. Now the cover of this one I noticed is like, well, this edition is really bright, and then the one Natalie has is really bright as well. Were you involved in like the design process covers of the book?
gosh, so not kind of, but no. They gave me a few different color options, and I was like, I like all of these. Which one does the sales and marketing like most? Because they override me every time anyway. Um, so as like authors, we really don't get much say in covers. There have been a few times where I have like put my foot down and been like, no, this is awful. Um, but you can't do that often, and like you can't like swing that weight around, and like you only have like a certain like number of times you can really do that before you're just told no a lot. And I was on the other side of cover design for a while. So I used to work at Bloomsbury as a marketing designer, and before that, I was a cover designer. So like I know the other side of it. I know like what goes into like choosing like color options and choosing what's on the cover and like how to market it. And so all of my adult romances, they all have like I call it the John Green effect, because it's just like a very vector like cover. It doesn't have a lot of detail to it. It's like the Fault in Our Stars cover, right? There's like not a lot of things going on, but it's still an intriguing cover. So all of my romance books going forward will kind of have that same kind of vibe to it, and all the colors will be complementary to each other, so they look good on a shelf beside each other.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All these editions, like they all suit each other. Like they all have like
Yeah.
similar, like when I put them all in their own section. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, and like Illumicrate, they had a choice to like keep the same cover or to like do a new cover, and they decided to like keep the cover and just like switch out the colors to like suit their color palette. So the Illumicrate books, they have like more of like a pastel color you know to them, and like the regular one has like it's more like a deep vibrant color to stand out on the shelf, because half of the battle is getting a reader to go to your book on the shelf instead of the one right beside it. And so the best way to do that is to have like a color block sort of cover, because it catches your eye. And there's this whole study about like whether like yellow covers are more appealing than blue covers, or if like purple covers are worse than like green covers. And then like you have to look at like what are some of the other books coming out, and at the same time, how many like books with blue covers are there? Do you want to also have a blue cover, or do you want to have a different color? Usually you want to have a different color, because if you have if like a book if like a shelf has just like a sea of blue, like the reader is just going to glaze over all of it. So
Yeah. I think blue is co popular because I color code. And so I have so
oh,
many blue books. And I was wondering that. I'm like, why are there so many blue books?
blue is still very, very popular, and I see there's like yellow up there too. So I have a fun story about yellow actually. So for a long, long time, um, so big box stores like Barnes and Noble and Target and Walmart, they have also a pretty big say in what a cover looks like, because they can choose not to stock a book based on the cover. So they have a so it was back when I was still doing cover design, so it was like back in 2014, 2013. But the buyer for Barnes and Noble, he was so adamant about not having yellow covers in his bookstore, in like any Barnes and Noble bookstore, that he would just routinely like not like he would shoot down yellow covers again and again and again and again. And then it turned out, like in the end, I have no idea if this is true or not, but he did shoot down yellow covers all the time. Like that was something that is true, but I don't know if this next part is true. But the rumor is that his dog picked the covers in the end, and his dog just didn't like yellow. And so I would love for that to be true, because like dogs are sometimes petty. And I just imagine it to be like a little Yorkie or something. But but yeah, so yellow covers weren't really big until I think it was Adam Silvera's More Happy Than Not. That was a big win for the yellow cover people.
Yeah. And I know that Christina Lawrence, I think it was the Unhoneymooners, it has like a really bright yellow cover. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember it was like the only one. Like, and I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then when they like showed me the cover for 7 Year Slip, I was like, "Oh, it's yellow? No. No." So I was very happy to see a yellow option, and we were like, "Well, we have to go with that one. The
Uh,
lore is too deep. We have to."
Now, I have heard some authors will use like certain, like they'll change their name to have their book on a shelf next to a certain author. Like, especially like Stephanie Myers. I know when she wrote like Twilight, a lot of authors would do like an M, so then it would be right there.
Yep. That is one way to I'm not sure like how much it actually affects sales anymore, but like before, when publishers did pay to have like shelf space, like it was a pretty big thing. Um Poston is literally just my last name. I wish I would have done something like that. Like in hindsight, having a pen name would have been fantastic. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Uh, but I was not thinking about that in 2013.
Now back to another love story. What is it you hope readers take away when they read your book or your latest book?
Well, it's definitely different from Dead Romantics and 7 Year Slip. It's not as well, it is deeply emotional, but in a different way. I don't play with like how uh so whenever I craft a book, I always like imagine like a reader's emotion on a pendulum. And so when I have like a bright and funny scene, it's like the pendulum swings one way. And so the higher it swings, the higher it will swing back towards like the moments of grief. And so I try to like balance that out in my stories, and in the Dead Romantics and the 7 Year Slip. They are like equal parts funny and fun, but they also have really like deep moments, and they come at surprising times because the reader just usually doesn't expect it at that moment. Um, but for a novel love story, I just wanted to write a really cozy book that felt like reading your favorite romance novel in front of a fire, right? I wanted something that was comforting and something that had low stakes but still like said something, I guess, and something that I wanted to explore, which was how do you carry on an author's legacy after they pass? Um what responsibility does like the reader have, and like how do we like carry on like someone's legacy after they can no longer like forward it, right? So so that's kind of what I wanted to explore in novel love story. So it's quieter and it's not as high of stakes, but it's kind of what I really needed to write when I wrote it, because 7 Year Slip was a lot. um it was very very difficult for me. And so novel love story is just it's just a breath of fresh air. It's low stakes, it's fun, it's campy, and I really kind of love it because it is.
Now, do you start off with the question, Ashley? We're going to kind of transition to your writing process, but like Dead Romantics, like you said, it was like had the ghost and the ghost story. And so do you go in thinking like, oh, what if, and then kind of start brainstorming and fleshing out your ideas like that?
No, actually. So weirdly enough, so for Sounds Like Love, my next book coming out June 17th, it's about two musicians, and they have a weird telepathic connection through a song that they can't get out of their heads. And that came about because I wanted to explore how burnout affects people differently. And to do that, I needed some way for these characters to be able to understand each other without having those hard conversations, because it's so hard to articulate what burnout is and how you feel, because most of the time you feel like a failure and no one wants to admit like that you failed, or that you are failing. And like, to be completely honest, like, you're not a failure if you have burnout. You just have burnout. That's all there's to it. um but so what I usually do is I go in with um a very like contemporary romance, no magic to it, no fun gimmick, and I craft the two characters, and I craft the characters as foils for each other, because in like, to me, romances always need to have like opposing characters who are foils for each other, and they will teach each other different things that they themselves could not learn by themselves. So that's kind of where I start. And then I go, okay, so how, like, what would be a fun way to have these characters learn this thing? And so for the Dead Romantics, a fun way was for Benji to become a ghost, right? And so the magical element became kind of like the supernatural sort of way to like discuss like death and saying goodbye, and like learn how to say goodbye. And so that's kind of how I navigate most of my like magical romances, is I always start with like the characters and their needs, and then I craft the magic around those needs and how best to like look at it, because I get really, really, really bored with just a regular romance. I'm like, what? Where's the magic? No one's flying? What's happening? You know, so uh So I always get very, very bored with those. And so for me, I found the best way to like not be bored when I'm writing something is to write a story that everyone has read before, but look at it from a different angle. And that angle is usually magical. So,
Yeah. Now, did you always want to be an author, Ashley? You mentioned doing cover designs, but
ooh.
was being an author always there?
Yeah, mostly. So I've always written. I started like writing fanfic back in sixth grade, way too young. I learned about lemons and way, way, way too young. Um, but I've written for a very long time. I used to have a really bad speech impediment, so I found that like writing words down, like the words actually like did what I wanted them to do, and it was just revolutionary for me. So I've always wanted to write, and I've always wanted to publish because I was like, oh, if Christopher Paolini can do it, I can do it too. Christopher Paolini had nepotism. So that makes it so much easier. Uh, and like I was a kid who lived in a trailer on the lake, man. I did not have that on my side. Um, and so I was going to go to college for screenwriting actually, because in high school I got really big into playwriting and screenwriting, and I won a few competitions, and I got like a 50,000 scholarship to SCAD and the Savannah College of Art and Design for their new playwriting program. And that was 2008 when the recession happened. So my mom lost her job, my dad almost lost his job, and I had to go to a state school instead. So I went to the University of South Carolina, and I majored in English, and I became the assistant to the screenwriting professor there. And yeah, I just kept writing, but I didn't know, I didn't and I kept querying, but every time I queried, it would come back as a rejection. So I'd like, yeah. So long story short, yeah, I've always wanted to be an author, but the road's always long, and like sometimes you query an agent, and like they're like, yes, I love your work, it's great, and sometimes you're like me, and you get 54 rejections in a row, and you pin them up on a wall, and the 55th one is Holly Root, and you're like, you know what? Yeah, absolutely. So, uh,
Yeah. Now
yeah.
you write in different genres. Actually, like you started in YA, well, obviously screenwriting, but like YA, what made you shift to, did you always want to write rom-com novels? Was that always there?
Oh yeah. So one great thing about Holly Root is that she only wanted me if I like wanted to do this as a career, right? And so that first initial call was like, okay, what do you want to do? The the manuscript that I had submitted to her was a young adult space opera that turned into Heart of Iron. And and I said that I wanted to write everything. I wanted to like explore different genres. I didn't want to stay in like one little like I didn't want to stay in like one area. I wanted to like have different eggs in different baskets. Um and so she was like, "Oh, good, fantastic." And like that was also one reason why I queried her too, was because she is an agent who like reps people in multiple different genres. So yeah, it was always something that I wanted to work on, and something that I wanted to do. I wanted to like spread out and like try different genres and different age groups. Um, and then in 2020, the pandemic happened. I lost all of my book contracts after Bookish and the Beast and Among the Beasts and Briars. And we queried with three other young adult novels. No, two young adult novels and one middle grade. And they died on submission. And then Holly was like, "Do you have anything weird?" And I was like, "Well, I have this ghost story that was a Raylo fanfic." So so that's how Dead Romantic came about.
Are we going to see a thriller from you one day, Ashley?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Uh I I have a few ideas up my sleeve, but I think you might see a romantasy from me first.
Yeah. Now, do you ever get writer's block when you're writing, or do you ever get stuck? What do you do to get unstuck?
I usually set down like my pen and I go for a walk and take a lap basically, and then I come back to it because I have deadlines and I really can't afford to just not write. So usually if I get writer's block these days, it's because the scene or the moment in the story that I'm writing, something is wrong with it, and it's my like brain telling me that something is not right, like the pieces aren't clicking. So go back and see what's not working. Um, so that's usually like my writer's block these days. Is just like my brain telling me that, oh, this isn't working, and you need to figure out why it's not working.
Now, how do you go about crafting your novels? Do you do like an extensive outline, or do you kind of are you like a pantser where you just sit and write?
I've done a little bit of everything. Every book has been a little bit different. I always say that like writing a new book is like learning a new skill because no two books are the same. I have yet to write two books the same in my career, and I've written like over 17 books at this point. Um, and like none of them have um been the same. And so most of the time I start with like with a scene that I really love, with like that's like the first scene that comes to mind, and then I branch out and I'm like, okay, who are these characters? Like what do they want? What genre is it? What age group? And then I go from there.
Now when crafting your characters, we do like a lot of like character worksheets sometimes in our classes. Do you do character worksheets for yours, or how do you get to know your characters?
Ooh, okay. So, because I am from fanfic, what I usually do is I put them in a coffee shop, and I'm like, okay, what like, and I do a writing exercise with them to get to know them. Because for me, like filling out like a questionnaire doesn't work for me because I will never go back and reread that questionnaire. Absolutely not. But like I will remember like their interactions in that coffee shop because it's something that I will have to have had to think about. Like, okay, like what would this main character do? Where would they sit? What would they order? Would they do the mobile order? Would they go up to the counter? Like, stuff like that. So, and that's how I get to know my characters usually, is like putting them in a very mundane setting and figuring out like how they would interact.
And knowing their drink order, I'm sure is important. Do they order a
Oh, oh,
latte?
oh yeah. Like I'm like, okay, okay. Would they order a latte, but then what kind of latte? Is it like skim milk or soy milk? Like would they be the kind of like character who would want it at a certain temperature, like just layers. And then like where would they sit? And if like all of the tables were taken, would they sit at the communal table or would they just leave? Like what would like what kind of character are
Now walk us through a day when you are writing. Do you get up super early and write? Like, do you have scenes planned that you are going to write after you do your coffee shop workshop?
Ooh, so most of the time I don't start writing until probably mid-afternoon because I have to do all the other stuff that comes with like being a writer these days, which is answering emails and doing videos and doing some social media stuff and that kind of thing. Most of the time I'm like cycling through two books at once anyway, so the morning is also for like past pages or copy edits, or like trying to figure out what my next novel is going to be. So I usually don't get to writing until mid-afternoon. And then but I always, whenever I do start my writing sessions, I always have notes from like the previous day's writing. So whenever I stop a scene, I always like put a bullet point and a note to myself. It's like, okay, this is what happens next, and this is where they go, and this is how you will marry these two scenes together. Um, and so that's kind of how I like prep myself for the next day. so I don't forget like what I was doing or like where I was going. And it's just so much easier when you leave yourself notes and you like leave yourself with like, you know, kind of like breadcrumbs. Sometimes I even leave myself like a link to a song, and I'm like, this is the vibe. Like, listen to it and go back into it. You can do it. I believe in you. So,
So motivate yourself. That's a good
oh,
good
absolutely.
motivator. Yeah.
Because like
Now what
writing is so solitary that like you have to be your own motivator and your own cheerleader. And oh, but I have to say one of the best tricks is to body double, even if you can't do it in person. Get on Zoom with like someone, like mute your audio, don't talk to them, and just body double for a while, and keep yourself accountable with a friend.
do you have a writing group, Ashley? That's something else we talk about in classes. Do you have that?
Oh, absolutely. I have two friends who I have known for gosh, about 10 years now. And we always exchange manuscripts. We always like talk through our stories. One of them is Catherine Locke. They are amazing. And then the other one is Caitlin Sage Patterson, and she's also great. They're both horse girls, so it's like book stuff and then horses, just so much horses. I'm not the biggest horse person, however, I am like I am so happy for them, and I love their horses so much.
That'd
But
be
yeah, I have a small but lovely writing group.
yeah, well, you could have a your next rom-com could be set at a horse ranch and they will be your experts.
No, I could not do that because then I would just devolve into like a horse romance, but not the kind you think. Because I would just think of like that one like dating sim where you date a horse with the face of a man. Like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know if I want you to Google it, but Godspeed. It is the stuff of nightmares.
Well, on your writing process, Ashley, what is your favorite part of it? Is it the copy edits? Is it getting to send it to your like peer group? Is it going through the first, I guess, development draft?
Um, I think I think my favorite part is the discovery draft, which is what I call my first draft. It's the draft where I'm basically like poking through the story to try and see what I really like and what like I want to explore more in subsequent drafts, and what I am bored with. I love that draft. That is where I find the most joy because like, anything goes really. Like I can throw in a dragon if I want to. And it's like, is it contemporary? Who cares? No one's gonna see this draft. It's me. But yeah, no, the discovery draft is definitely
Yeah.
closely followed by past pages because man, I just love it when I've read this thing 20 billion times and then like an unsuspecting reader comes in and is like, hey, this this entire scene is is wrong and it's in the wrong place, and this is not actually how X, Y, and Z work. And I'm like, oh cool. So I have to change everything and I didn't catch any of it. Cool.
After the fact.
After the fact. And so like there's like in it's so funny that in past pages like there are little things like little facts that you just don't catch, or like there's discrepancies in scenes that you and like and continuity errors that you just don't catch in like the first 20 times you read your manuscript, and then someone else comes in and is like, hey, this guy is holding a cup and he wasn't holding a cup before. Well, when did he pick up the cup? And like they're like on like a beach, and I'm like, I don't know, are there cups on the beach? Did he find it? Did it wash up from the shore? So
Yeah, yeah, that's always fun. Or the characters sitting and they're like, well, how are they sitting now? And it's like, I don't know. They're sitting.
Oh God, the worst one, the most mortifying one was, I think it was, oh gosh, I think it was actually in the Dead Romantics. We got it all the way through to past pages. And then a cold reader was like, "Why are there five hands in this scene?" And I'm like, "Wait, what? Five hands?" And then I went through it. I'm like, one, two. There is one more hand, isn't there? So I was like, I don't know why there are five hands, but there are. You're right. The
It's the fun
elusive fifth
times.
hand.
Yeah. And then you sit there and you're like, oh, I can't believe I didn't see that or notice that. But yeah.
Yep, it's just like, oh man, I thought I choreographed that so well, but it turns out it's just that one mystery hand just tapping someone's cheek, and it's just like, how their hands are doing something very different right now.
Now, Ashley, you did mention about book talk and social media, and I was curious, like, how important is social media for you as an author? Like, I know you mentioned you work on it every day. Is that now
Mhm.
part of your routine?
So I work on it every day because I want to like keep my Instagram active. I'm not really active anywhere else anymore. But just on Instagram right now. I think I'm going to like also like probably transition over to like YouTube and do some long form things in the future. But at the moment it's just Instagram, and um it's just planning out when to announce like Goodreads giveaways, when to announce like sweepstakes, events that are coming up. And I want to like space them out so I'm not like just flooding my social with that. And I have hired someone who like helps me with that now. So that is like that's a little bit of, stuff off my plate, which is great. Um I I am so happy, speaking of like book talk and like book influencers and everything. I'm happy that there is like more of a like gravitational shift towards them being like the center of a book community than the author, because I personally do not think the author should be the head of like a fandom or a book community, because it's a reader space, and I don't think that authors should be in reader spaces in that way, um like whatsoever. And like that's just like from like years and years in fandom, and like being in fandom and being a part of like the community side of things. So I'm really happy that like most of the book community like orbits around influencers and like book people now, and there's less pressure on authors to also be the head of that too, and also foster that kind of community. And so it leaves authors the chance to actually do what we are paid to do, which is right. Everything else is like free labor. So I am very, very, very happy that like that's how the dice rolled.
Mhm. Now, if there's one piece of advice you can give aspiring writers, what would it be?
Ooh, um, one piece of advice. I would say the one piece of advice would be keep something just for yourself. Keep like, whether it's a fanfic, whether it's a story, whether it's like original fiction, it doesn't matter what it is. Keep it just for you. Never like it, and like never show it to anyone. Never want to do anything more with it than to just like exist with it. Because this industry is really good at making you feel so small and so insignificant, like so much of the time, that I found that it is very empowering and very lovely to go back to something that you just love to do for the sake of loving it. And it helps you remember why you like to write, because it's writing, because it's what like fulfills like a part of your soul, right? And it's really easy to forget that when everything you write is like, oh, how am I going to publish this? How am I going to like where like what publishing house is best for this, or like, you know, oh, will this book flop? Like when you're just thinking about that for every single thing you create, it turns into something that you end up hating. So
Yes. Now I was going to open the floor up for questions. If anybody had any questions, we could open it up and you could ask Ashley. Danny?
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and for doing this. As a fellow fan fiction enthusiast, I wanted to ask two things. First, and I saw a couple of people agreed, what fandoms? You mentioned Raylo, but and then second, really curious how you transition from uh, someone else's world into your own when you take a story like that and make it something that you're publishing outside of like Archive of Our Own.
Mhm, mhm. Um, so I okay, so first question. Um, Obviously Star Wars. I love Star Wars. Marvel. I was a huge Stucky fan. Huge Stucky fan. Um, let's see here. There's so the thing is like I still write fanfic. I have a username on AO3 and I still regularly update. And I do not tell anyone what it is or what I currently write in because I love keeping that anonymity. Like that is my joy. Like that is my one thing that I do. So I write in dead fandoms right now. I'm just low stakes. It's just me just updating things however I want. But most of like the big fandoms I have like dipped my toes into. And as for your second question, so Dead Romantics was Raylo, but there's a caveat to that. So I will never take a finished fanfic that I have written and like transition it to original fiction. That's not what I ever want to do, but that's just because of like my hard line and like where I find joy and stuff. So I never want to cross that. The Dead Romantics was a tiny bit different because I had written, I think it was like 2 or 3 chapters in it, and I realized, and it was an AU, it was like contemporary, you know, it was been the editor at a publisher called Falcon House Publishers, and yeah, it was very much like RA divorce from Star Wars, but I realized that I wanted to take the idea of a publish like of like, you know, a story set in the world of publishing and make it my own. So I stopped writing the fanfic like 3 chapters in. And I deleted it off AO3 and I shook most of the like the fandom stuff out. But there's like little things that still made it, like his name is still Ben, but it's Benji. His last name's Andor, you know. Falcon House Publishers, best friend is Rose. Uh, so like it's just like little things like that I kept for me because like it's fun. Florence is named Florence because I imagine Florence Pugh as like yeah. So so I yeah, so I took most of the fanfickiness out of the Dead Romantics and I rebuilt it from the ground up and I kept the things that like gave me a little bit of like hee joy, you know. Uh but yeah, I don't think I don't ever see myself like transitioning a work of fanfic to original just because of my own boundaries. But I'm very excited for all the Hermione coming out this year. I will tell you that. I mean, between Rose and Chains and Alchemized and the Fall for Your Enemies one, Draco Malfoy's whatever it's called now. I'm very excited for all of them. It's gonna be fun, and I'm very, very, very interested from like an academic perspective of like how much they have to change and like how that affects the story and like at what point is it still like fanfic and infringement, right? And I don't know, I love that very, very, very much. I when I was in college, I took a lot of like copyright classes. And so I love like that part of like this like new and uncharted territory, and I want to see like how that like how these authors manage to like basically reinvent their own wheel. And I'm very excited.
We also have a question from Nat Ashley. She said, do you have any pitching and quarrying tips?
Ooh. Yes. But like anything specifically?
Not necessarily, I guess, because you mentioned that you took 55, right? Number 55 was your lucky number. Did you change or edit anything with your pitching that got you that 55, or was it just kind of like waiting for the yes?
So weirdly enough, 55 was weird. Uh so it was back when like Twitter was still Twitter. It was like back in 2015, and Holly Roots like made a call out for she wanted a space opera. And I had already queried Holly before, and it went straight into the slush pile. And so she was like, "Yeah, I'm like that. Does anyone have a space opera?" And I was like, "Does she know that she already rejected me? We'll see. We'll see. Let's see." So so I was like, "Hey, I have one," and she was like, "Oh, send it to me." And I was like, "Bet, absolutely." so uh so I did, and then it turns out like she never actually got eyes on like the first time I submitted it, like went straight to the slush pile because it was when things were happening and like her life and everything. Anyway, long story short, it was weird. I was never going to like query Holly twice, but uh you know, I think you can query agents more than once if it's the same book, only if the book has changed substantially between revisions, and if it's like like certifiably different. And mine also was at the time. I had completely rewritten it and overhauled it. I think that when you like querying and pitching is so different today, though. Like you can't do that anymore. You can't like tweet an agent who like has an open call for a space opera and be like, "Hey, I have one." Like that's just not something that you can do anymore. So honestly, that's completely out of my element at this point.
We have a question next from Kennedy Ashley. She says, how do you choose the point of view for a story? She tends to do dual first person point of view because I end up fleshing out the love interest and then want to write from their point of view too. How do you know what the best point of view is?
Usually, so I figured the point of view based on like what secrets do these characters have, and how do I want them revealed? Like how do I want the big moments to play out? Do I want the big moments to play out like from like surprise, or like the reader knowing like from the very beginning? Because I find that in like dual points of view, it's really hard to keep tension, and the tension has to be like opposing with the characters and their narration like almost the entire time. And I am anxious as it is, and I am not good at that. The most I'd done was Among the Beasts and Briars has a dual perspective, but man, oh man, that was a lot easier because they were also fighting, hungry woods, and they were going through like an epic quest, right? So there was like a lot more tension in it. But I always like try to decide like how do I want to build tension, and like from what perspective do I want that tension to be viewed from. And so that's usually why I choose like first person past tense. Because for me, I like writing one character going through a story and like having kind of a narrow sort of like field of vision and being surprised by things. than like than like just than different kinds of tension, I guess.
Another question is from Margie. She says, why would you recommend a pin name?
Um, let's see here. Why would I recommend it? Because I think that pin names allow you a lot more freedom in your personal life because because you can have a pin name and say if you live in a small town, no one knows you, right? But if you're you and you go up to like say I don't know a grocery store and you pay with a credit card and someone sees that your name is Ashley Poston and they ask, "Oh, did you write that ghost book that was on GMA?" Yeah, it's fun. So it's like you always have to be on in a way sometimes because like you are always like representing your brand if you like are your brand, but um with with a pin name you can like set your brand aside and be you and be like divorced from it. So, and I think that's a lot healthier.
Yeah. Yeah. We have another question from Aaron. It is, what is the best option for a self-published author to get an appealing cover? How much is too much to spend for a self-published cover versus too little?
Ooh. um I am not the best person to ask that because the last time that I did covers was back in like 2015. And like the prices are vastly different now. So I guess like the questions I would ask is like why do you choose self pub and like a cover's not going to like be the end all be all of like your marketing, right? Because you also have to be like your publicist, you have to be your own marketer, you have to figure out Google ads. Like it's not just you'll upload a book and then everyone will just love the cover and then read it because there's a lot of slush out there and it's just like getting it past the slush that's the problem, and it used to just be a good cover does that, but not anymore sadly, because there's just such an influx of like people writing and books, and so like a cover is important, but I don't think you need to stress about it being the most important thing anymore.
Mhm. Were there any other questions for Ashley that anybody didn't put in the chat that wanted to ask anything? Well, Ashley, what are your social media handles so we can find you after and stalk all of your social media?
Oh, fantastic. I am at Hey Ash Poston on Instagram. And I think my TikTok is still kicking around, but I haven't updated it since the Ben Barnes video went viral. That's fun. Um, and yeah, I'm also on Blue Sky and Threads also with Hey Ash Poston. And yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. Uh, and I'm just over there having fun, just being a little guy, you know.
Now, do you have a website too, Ashley?
I do. It's ashposton.com. If you type in ashleyposton.com, it comes up with a different website that someone else bought when I was still in my wee author days of Geekarella. And they're using Amazon affiliate links to sell my books and get money off of it. There's nothing I can do about that. So that's fun. They were savvy. They knew before I did that it was going to be an investment for them.
And then you have a new book coming out this summer in June.
I
Is that
do.
right?
It's called Sounds Like Love. It comes out June 17th. I'll be announcing my tour at some point in the future. Um, and it's gonna be fun. I'm very excited. I'm really really proud of this next book and what it says. And it's going to be definitely more in the vein of 7 Year Slip than novel love story, but you know, good tears, good tears.
Now, how long did it take you to write your upcoming book?
I started working on it in February of last year, and I had to rewrite it about 4 times. So like the book that you will read will have I would have started drafting it in the end of August. And then I finished it in November. So
And
I'm a
Kendra,
wickedly fast writer. I always have been. All of my friends are like a lot slower than I am. I've just been like writing fanfic for so long that I know like I know my strengths and like weaknesses at this point, which is the only reason I can do that. Do I have arcs? Yes, I do have arcs. I have there's physical arcs now floating around. My friend Rec and Rachel got one, and I'm like, Rachel, you got one before me. And you can also request an arc, an e-galley from I think Edelweiss and NetGalley. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's up on NetGalley.
mhm.
We can put the
It
link
is.
in. Yeah.
I'm so excited. The love interest is like a hosier sort of character with like daddy issues. So it's good.
All right, and Kendra did put your links in the chat, so everybody can click that as well. Now we're about to let you go, Ashley, but is there anything else you want to add?
Thank you so much for letting me like chat at you guys for an hour. This was really lovely, and thank you for all the questions. It was so great to meet y'all.
Yes, it was great to have you, and thanks for being the first ever author on Literary Hour and kicking it
Yay!
off. So thank you, Ashley.
Of course. I hope you have so many amazing guests in the future.
Yes, we're excited. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Be on the lookout for more events as well. And be sure to follow Ashley and check out her latest novel coming out soon. And of course, the novel Love Story. Thank you, everyone.